Welcome to DPAC Meet the Candidates Night. Thank you all for coming tonight and expressing your interest in serving as a Rush-Henrietta Board of Education member. First, we'll get started by asking each of you to spend a couple of minutes sharing a bit of information about yourselves and your background. Mrs. Wickerham, would you like to start, please?
Sure. Good evening. I'm Phyllis Wickerham. I am a current board member. I've been on the Board of Education for the last 9 years. I'm here tonight to ask for your continued support as I seek re-election. I'm not a native Rush-Henrietta person. We moved to the area 29 years ago for employment, and our son Scott was in the middle of 2nd grade at that point, and we didn't know anybody, but the File family community welcomed us with open arms. When our son Tyler was born a few years later with significant special needs, Rush-Henrietta community was here for us, and it helped us navigate a very difficult educational path. From those very first days, as an RH parent, I knew that we were in the best of hands here. The district encouraged me to get involved. First, I started with the Special Ed Parents Forum. It was a group of RH parents that helped me learn about the special education system and about Rush-Henrietta and how the programs here would help my child, and that started me on a path of getting involved at different levels. I started out with other parent groups, and I moved on to the District Parent Advisory Council. I was in your position at one point, and then to the Budget Advisory Council, and 9 years ago there was an opening on the board, and I decided that was the next step for me. I wanted to give back to the community that had given so much to our family, and the quality education with the love and support that we needed. And I believe that my knowledge of the district, its finances, its programs, its services, they have grown considerably as a member of the board, and so I'm running for re-election for the same reasons I did 9 years ago. I really would love to continue working for the community that has given us so much.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Logel.
My name is Bob Logel. I've been a member of the community here for 13 years. My wife, Lynn, of 20 years this year. We have a daughter, Stephanie, and a son, Jason. I have been on the Sherman PTA for 7 years, the Berger PTO for 1 year, member of the District Finance and Audit Committee for 1 year now. Also the auditing the PTA, the Sherman PTA books for, 5 years I think it's been now. I joined the BAC 5 years ago, and the last 4 years I've been chairing the BAC. So, when this opportunity came up, I thought, well, the next step is to run for the board. I wanted to be able to give back to the community, and that just seemed the next logical step.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Delaney?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Delaney. I've lived in Henrietta for 26, almost 27 years. Married, and have 3 kids, 2 of which have gone through the district and 1 of which is in 9th grade. So I started back at Sherman way long time ago, and got involved with the PTA, was welcomed in there, and quickly asked to be a bigger part of it. Started out as secretary, and then later on, in later years, moved to co-president, moved through Berger parent group and helped with fundraising a year there, 9th grade academy, high school parent groups, and a couple of the other committees I've sat on is the District Parent Advisory Committee, DPAC, and Shared Decision Making, SDM, and also our Space Committee, which looks at the space needs in our district. As I've moved through those committees, the goal has always been to help kids and help all kids, and that's what I'm looking to continue to do, and this is a way to broaden that and help all kids in the district, not just the school or not just a committee-wide, but to go a little further with that.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Thanks so much, and thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. Certainly appreciate the interest that everyone in this room has, that the folks watching at home when they do have in our district and what's going on here. A little different than perhaps some of the other folks that are sitting at the dais with me today. I am very much at the outset of our experience with the school district. I have a 3-year-old who is a bundle of wonderful joy and lots of energy, and we are getting ready to enroll him, if we can find space, in the UPK program. And we are looking at another 13 to 14 years of being involved in this district. And obviously, we're deeply concerned about the direction that the district takes. Certainly, Rush-Henrietta schools have just a wonderful leadership. We have wonderful folks that have made significant contributions in their capacity on the board. That notwithstanding, we definitely recognize that there's even higher that we can go. There's even more that we can do. I think the strengths of our district include our strong tax base and the fact that we do keep a low tax rate. Certainly, we've got great parents, we've got wonderful teachers and an awesome staff, and the diversity in our district is absolutely a strength. And diversity a lot of times gets rendered in one context, but we want to talk about diversity broadly, and we'll get into that a little bit later tonight. But if you choose to install someone like myself on this school board, then what you're looking for is somebody that's going to be transparent, somebody that's going to take a lot of these acronyms and kind of boil them down to some plain speak and language that hopefully parents can understand, and someone that's going to be responsible with taxpayer dollars and is going to really work hard to ensure that we spend our money right. Last thing I want to say, and if you catch the statement that we put out, we'll hopefully again talk some more about that tonight, is that we've got to be smart about the money that we spend in this district. Our current proposed budget is $119 million, and I just tend to think that if we leverage our resources right and spend those dollars here locally, that we not only get the benefit of a wonderful education for our children, but we get the ancillary benefit of being able to stimulate our local economy and create some jobs.
Thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski?
Hi, my name is Annmarie Strzyzynski. A little bit about me. I'm married with 2 children, 2 grown children, a 23 and 25-year-old. We're all graduates of Rush-Henrietta, and very happy to say that. I've lived in the district for the last 39 years. I hate to say that out loud. My husband and my children have been lifelong residents. I moved here when I was 10, and I have to say I came from the city school district to here, and I was quite surprised at the difference in just the learning environment in general. So I've always been fairly happy. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most of the time happy. And I will tell you that I work for a nonprofit, Lifetime Assistance, who supports people who have developmental disabilities. My children, my son works for the medical examiner as a medical investigator. My daughter works for Strong Memorial Hospital as a patient ambassador in both Galisanos and the ED. And my husband's the assistant fire chief out here, retiring from the city to take a job at the town that he has desired to do his entire life. So we definitely like to give back to the community. We're really, really happy working with people. That's pretty much what we do. So that's pretty much what I can say about me. I will say that I didn't have the same reasons for joining the board. I really hadn't thought much about it, but my next door neighbor asked if I'd ever considered it. And I honestly never have. But then I said, let me think about it, and I started researching, and I was thinking, you know what, I think I might be able to do that. And then the more I was reading, the more I felt like I had enough opinions and maybe some background that could be a benefit. So I want to say thank you again for giving us a chance to speak, and you may have to listen to me mumble a little bit.
Okay, thank you. All right, first question will be, what does being a Rush-Henrietta Board of Education member look like to you? And we'll start with you, Mr. Logel.
I believe it's someone who cares about the community and the kids. To me, you know, it's the next logical step in a lot of things for people in all of our positions. I think that you need to be caring. You need to be out there with the people. You need to know what the issues are. You need to know what people really want to do to move forward. I think it's you just need to be out there with people, and really, you need to really pay attention to what the issues are.
Okay. Mrs. Delaney, what does being a Rush-Henrietta Board of Education member look like to you?
Well, I think for me, part of what it looks like is what's been modeled for me and what I've seen. Something that I've really loved about our Board of Education is that they go out to the individual schools and our liaisons to parent groups, and they're very accessible to the public, and that gives me a feeling of transparency in our district. You're always welcome to come to meetings and have your voice heard. And for me personally, I think that you need to be, first of all, a good listener, because to have good understanding and to move forward, you have to be able to hear what concerns are and then evaluate that. And I just feel like that, you're a good listener, and I'm also someone who would ask a lot of questions to make sure I understand things, and sometimes even to challenge thinking, or to maybe to look at something in a different way. I'm not afraid to do that, and I'm also looking to be part of a team that works towards a goal, that the kids are the goal. What's best for our kids. How can we help them achieve a really bright future and realize their dreams, whether it's going to college or in a career, however that looks. That's, I think, what I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Banister, what does being a Rush-Henrietta Board of Education member look like to you?
Sure. Well, for one thing, it means a big cup of coffee and maybe some no-dos, because I was here last night with the board till about 10 o'clock, a little after. And certainly, all jokes aside, I think a term came up last night that I think is particularly appropriate for this question. And that term is informed oversight. And I think being a board member means exhibiting informed oversight. And to kind of unpack that term a little bit, let's start with the informed part. And I'm certainly informed by some of my past professional experiences, as well as obviously having done the research and looked into some of the things that have transpired with the board over the course of the last couple of years. In terms of professional experience, the kind of one item on my resume I think is particularly appropriate for this effort is that I worked for the State University of New York. I worked for SUNY for several years. And in that capacity, one of the things that was kind of in my purview was to look at college and career readiness. Terrible statistic that so many kids were coming into the SUNY system that $70 million a year was being spent on remediation to get kids up to snuff. And so we definitely want to kind of bring a focus to those kinds of things here in the district. Finally, the oversight role means that part of the job is certainly listening and being a part of the board and being conciliatory, but the other part is making sure that we ask the tough questions. I think Rhonda kind of alluded to that, that we ask some of the tough questions that need to be asked, that we're provocative when it's necessary, certainly collegial, but provocative when it's necessary, so that we can ensure that we get the most bang for our buck, that, again, we're responsible with the taxpayers' dollars, and that we have the highest level of achievement for our students as possible.
Thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski?
I feel a lot like Rhonda does. I think that everything obviously comes down to the kids. That's the most important thing. I think as a board member, I look at it more as a liaison between the public and what the kids want and what the teachers want. I think that it's definitely teamwork. I think it's pretty much exactly what you said. I hate to repeat what she said. And I do think that as far as asking questions, I think that's absolutely necessary. And I think with a fresh set of eyes, sometimes when you have committees that have been on together over and over a period of time, sometimes you're not able to look outside that box. So when you have a fresh set of eyes coming in, sometimes there's other possibilities that may be able to be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
So last. I think a Rush-Henrietta board member, for me, means being passionate about learning, what our students need, what our community is looking for, It also means being available when you have opportunities to go in and visit the buildings. Those are always extremely enjoyable, but very informative. You talk to staff, you talk to students, you get to see the programs and services. So I think continuous learning about what is going on in our district is critical. So being a good listener, being a good communicator. We also have to make sure that our representatives at the state and local levels know how decisions that are made at that level affect the school district. So we have to communicate at that level as well. I think you need to be comfortable advocating for issues that are important to the community here. You have to be open-minded as well. Like everyone else said, you have to be able to work as a team and talk about issues. You may not always agree, but you have to be able to listen to other people's points of view and talk things through and come up with the solution that is best for our students. I think that being a board member for me means that you give it your all. You give everything you have.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We'll start with Mrs. Delaney. What impact do you feel you will have on the district through your involvement with the board?
I would hope that my impact would be that we can create some equality for students and continue to help them to strive to meet the goals that are set before them so that when they graduate, they will be ready for college and career. You know, it's all about the kids, and so, you know, I'll do what it takes. I'll learn what I need to learn and put that to good use, hopefully.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Banister, what impact do you feel you will have on the district through your involvement with the board?
Sure. Well, I think one of the roles that I really want to embrace, should the voters choose to elect me to the school board, is the role of an advocate. I see the school board as in fact, actually one of the discrete activities that the board takes is to lay out its legislative positions. And because of some of the background that I've had, having worked both in the governmental sector, in the private sector, and in the nonprofit sector, and having established some of those relationships over time, I definitely want to try to bring those to bear in a way that is beneficial as possible to the district. I think that's number one. I think number two, I want to kind of echo Rhonda's comments with respect to really being able to bring attention to student achievement and kind of focus on some of the areas. I know we've got a little bit of lagging going in the math area, particularly for the intermediate and kind of early high school years, and so we want to bring some focus to that. And I think finally, I think what's important to me is to think about both within our kind of district community, but then our broader community, how we can be impactful in the way that we spend this district's dollars. Again, if there are opportunities for us to maximize the real sacrifice that taxpayers make to contribute to the system, we ought to do that in a way that spends those dollars locally, and we ought to do it in a way that helps to stimulate the economy and create jobs. So I want to kind of bring some attention to bear on that and hopefully urge the district to start tracking those numbers and start thinking about how we move in the direction of spending our dollars even more wisely than we have.
Thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski, goodness, I'm sorry. Mrs. Strzyzynski, what impact do you feel you will have on the district through your involvement with the board?
Well, I think some of that comes down to just some of my general characteristics. I'm really, really honest. I ask a lot of questions when I'm not sure if I understand something or if I just want to know more. I think that people feel very comfortable talking to me, so I would hope that whether it's the community, it's the students, whoever it felt they needed to talk to someone, they would feel available to talk to me, and I'm pretty good at listening, so I would be able to hopefully bring information to and from. I guess that's the best thing I can say.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
I think for me, I'm coming from a pretty unique perspective from the rest of the group here tonight because I am a current board member, have been a board member for the last 9 years. I think what I can bring is that historical knowledge of, we've had a lot of changes over the last 9, 10, 15 years, and I have been involved with all of those changes, so I bring that historical knowledge. I think we've made some shifts with the Common Core and understanding what's been required of us and how we've come through that. The same type of thing. I think being able to communicate where we were, where we're going, how we got there. I think that understanding the policies that we have in the district and reviewing and making sure gives me a lot of different knowledge than most people have. I think also making sure that, the programs and services that we're providing, I think I have that historical knowledge as well. Where were we? What have we done? And the conversations that we've had. So I think I bring a different perspective to the board.
Thank you. Mr. Logel, finally, what impact do you feel you will have on the district through your involvement with the board?
Well, I'd like to be an advocate between the teachers, the children, the parents, because having an engineering degree and now working in finance, I see that the jobs that are out there now, the kids really need to be much more ready than they are, I think, for college, right? And I want to be that advocate that allows everybody to understand that allows everybody to maybe, we push the children a little bit in the right direction, and we all get together and do that. I also, being on the BAC and dealing with the budgeting, I think I would like to be known as someone who, he's fair, and maybe our taxes don't go way out of whack, and we're all good for that.
Great, thank you. The final question that the DPAC membership has for you, we'll ask you first, Mr. Banister. What do you see as the biggest challenge for the Rush-Henrietta School District over the next 5 years?
Sure. Well, I want to echo Bob's comments there, quite frankly, in terms of the biggest challenge, which is we know that we are in a place now across this country where STEM is more important than it has ever been before. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics is absolutely critical for the future of this country, and particularly in a place like Henrietta, because we do have some great institutions that focus on those areas, including Rochester Institute of Technology. And so when I saw some of the scores and I was reviewing kind of how we're performing, I think it's awesome that we have such high graduation rates. We are doing very well in the ELA area, but we want to make sure that we're doing well across the board, and that particularly when we see that little CCR, another acronym there, College and Career Readiness, that we are scoring those high numbers as well, because we don't just want our young people to graduate, we want them to be prepared for careers and for college. And so I think that's a huge challenge that all of us can pull together on and focus, and I'm just excited about some of the plans that I've seen laid down to start addressing those issues. The board's role, again, is informed oversight. So then it's about implementation and making that happen. And I certainly intend to be at the table to try to do that.
Mrs. Strzyzynski.
Mine's going to be probably a lot different than what everybody else's is, but I will say I think the biggest challenge, there's a lot of challenges I think that'll be coming ahead, but I think the $15 minimum wage will probably be one of the biggest challenges because it's going to affect so many people. So a lot of the people that work for the school district do not make anywhere near $15. So when there's other places that are offering that, they're going to lose a lot of people who are good, hardworking people that care for our children. So I think that when that comes along, and I know that you're big into the budget things, and I know that that affects the budget, in the long run, if we don't address that, what's going to happen is maybe we save money by not paying people more money and not having a livable wage, but later on, when they have to start applying for government assistance because they can't afford whatever insurance or whatever it is that they need, they're going to end up having to pay higher taxes anyway because it's going to go up one way or the other. It's very, very hard for someone not to make a livable wage. And for a parent, I think if I was a parent of a child who had a disability, and you're telling me that the person working with my child day in and day out isn't worth $15, that's a big concern. So I think that it's going to be very hard to keep staff. I think it's going to be hard for staff to be happy, and the kids are never going to be able to be successful if everyone involved with that child's not happy. So, yep, the parent's the first teacher, but you're not going to have happy parents if somebody's not caring for their child appropriately. When someone's not coming to work happy, that child can't be, taught appropriately. Teachers are going to be short-staffed because they're going to lose their paraprofessionals and other people with it. So I think in the long run, I think that's going to be a very, very big issue that's going to have to be addressed.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the Rush-Henrietta School District over the next 5 years?
I think you'll probably hear the same type of answers from most of us. It is the financial stability of our district. We have wonderful programs and services. We have staff that we truly appreciate. Being able to balance providing those services and giving staff the wages and the opportunities to learn more about their jobs and the costs of those things, balanced with the amount of money that we draw in taxes, the amount of money we get from state aid. It is a difficult struggle. I mean, being a part of the last 9 budget developments, we've seen the ups and downs and the ins and outs, and I think Simeon and Annmarie are both right. Finances are a challenge. But we have done a very good job in making sure that we have balanced our quality, and I believe very high quality education. There's always room for work. There's always room for growth, but we've balanced that with keeping the tax rate in our district low and manageable, and I think that that is a challenge. But I think our biggest challenge for me is making sure that parents know we are really working hard to make sure that their students are college and career ready, and giving them that information on how we go about doing it.
Thank you. Mr. Logel?
I think there's a few challenges moving forward, but I still think being on the BAC that the budget is a huge challenge. When you take into account that healthcare is rising at an enormous rate, wages are going to be rising, the $15 an hour. That is just, it's incredible to think that what we have to work with and what we're going to have to do down the road. There's going to have to be a lot of work that needs to be done to keep the tax rate low, but yet still make sure that the kids get what they need to be educated well. And I believe that that is going to be a pretty monumental challenge in the next few years.
Thank you. And Mrs. Delaney, finally, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the Rush-Henrietta School District over the next 5 years?
I think about 3 different things. First of all, implementing our redistricting and full-day kindergarten. That's pretty hot on our plates right now, and we want that to go as smoothly as possible. So that's a challenge. Also, as everyone else has said, continuing to try and maintain that fiscally sound budget, while also complying with the continual changes that the state imposes on us and trying to meet those goals, as well as just continuing to strive to prepare the kids to be college and career ready. It keeps changing. College expects more and more, and to meet those challenges, we need to stay on top of that.
Thank you. Okay, so we have several questions from the community. We will plan to spend about 1 minute per question for these. We'll start with you, Mrs. Strzyzynski. Do you see this as a 3-year commitment or longer than that?
Well, if it could be like Phyllis, longer. I think that the community as a whole, like I said, my whole family believes we love this community. We're never moving from this community. Other than me, we were all born in this community. So no, I think it's ongoing because the children now are the people that are going to be running the world as we age. So it's going to be something that's going to continue. Can you tell me what you said again?
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure. So do you see this Board of Education,
Oh.
being a Board of Education member, as a 3-year commitment or longer than that?
No, it'll probably be longer. And for me, maybe a little bit, because it's going to take me a little bit to learn if I was elected.
Okay. Mrs. Wickerham? Clearly.
For me, for me, it's the next 3 years. I'm hoping to see the reconfiguration go very smoothly. We've worked really hard to hopefully make that happen. I also have a grandson who's going to be starting UPK in the fall, and he'll be the first class of full-day kindergarten. So I'm excited to see that. And for me, I enjoy my work on the board, so this is a lifelong commitment for me, whether sitting behind the table or out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Logel?
I think it's definitely much longer than a 3-year commitment for me. I have 2 young kids in the district. I have a 3rd grader. So my thought behind that is I want to be here to see everything through until he graduates and beyond. Because let's face it, the issues aren't going to go away. And having kids in the school district, it just makes it easier knowing what their issues are. The teachers relate to us, having kids. So I believe that this is going to be at least a 9-10 year or longer.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney?
I see myself as I've been interested in the school district for a really long time, and this is just another step in that direction. As was already said, it takes. I'm assuming it's going to take more than 3 years to really learn the job and learn it well, and it's constantly changing. So I'm here for as long as the public wants to keep me here, and we'll take each time as it comes.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Yeah, I just, the premise of the question, I think, is one of those challenges that folks that, seek elected office tend to confront, because the fact of the matter is that it really doesn't matter whether you want 3 years or 21 years or 100 years, right? What really matters is the job you do and whether the voters think that you have done a good enough job to offer you the opportunity to continue to represent them. And so I think what really matters is the degree of commitment that one has to the district. I mentioned at the outset, my son is going into the district. My little guy, the person in my life, I love my wife, and my little boy is just means a lot to me, like all your kids mean a lot to you. So I think the commitment is absolutely there for being involved and being engaged in this district, certainly for the next 14 to 15 years that he goes through UPK and kindergarten and then on into the district. But the fact of the matter is that in this particular role, it'll be up to the voters. I'm going to do, if elected, the best job that I can do, represent the best that I can, talk to as many folks as I can, go to all the schools, meet as many parents as we can talk to and engage. And if those parents see fit to send me back again in 3 years' time, then we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks. Mrs. Strzyzynski?
Aye.
Oh, you started the question.
Okay.
Sorry. Donna.
Say it one more time. Right?
Okay. So, Mrs. Wickerham, we'll start with you this time. Have you been following the New York State Legislature and Board of Regents actions as they pertain to education and specifically Rush-Henrietta? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes. Some of the things that have happened over the course of the last several years, we have followed very closely. Common Core, the minimum wage, yes, I follow it. How do I think being involved at the legislative level when Monroe County School Boards, we are members of, Monroe County School Boards Association allows me the opportunity to go on lobby trips and to interact with our representatives. So I think that for me, I've been able to learn more about what they are thinking, but then also present what we've been thinking. Repeat the question again, please.
Have you been following the New York State Legislature and Board of Regents actions as they pertain to education and specifically to Rush-Henrietta? And what are your thoughts on this?
I think my thoughts are that we need to communicate to our regents, to our legislators, the impact that their decisions make on us. We do a very good job of that here in our district by attending a lot of different opportunities. And I think that that's our role, is to educate them on what their decisions do. I don't know how often they listen, but we do put our voice out there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Logel, have you been following the New York State Legislature and Board of Regents actions as they pertain to education and to Rush-Henrietta? And what are your thoughts on this?
That's a good question. And
It's a scary question.
that is a very scary question. I followed it a little bit, being with Budget Advisory Council. I followed a little bit concerning the gap elimination adjustment. And I think it's about time that the state is doing this and allowing us to have more money in the district that we need. My thoughts on that are, I haven't followed it to a T like maybe others have, because I have really focused more on the budgeting aspect of it. And so, the Common Core I followed very little. I do know that there's some issues that need to be addressed with that. But I'm just very glad at this point that the gap elimination adjustment, if I can get it out, has finally taken place.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney, shall I repeat the question?
Sure.
Have you been following the New York State Legislature and Board of Regents actions as they pertain to education and specifically to Rush-Henrietta? What are your thoughts on this?
I've followed to the degree where I sit in enough of the meetings where we talk about some of those things in the District Parent Advisory Committee, where it's parents coming together from all the schools. We are informed of changes and things that kind of go back and forth. And Dr. Graham has been very active, and he is at all our meetings and lets us know some of the latest that's going on. I still think that there's work to be done, and I'm glad that our board divides and conquers, so to speak, so that they go to different legislator meetings and putting their voice out there. They go to Albany and things like that, and I think that's very important. And if I'm in that position, I will do what I can and help out where I can on that.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, fairly closely, I've been paying attention to what's going on down there in Albany. But even more importantly than watching what's going on in Albany, I've really been tracking what's going on here. And by that, I mean that I watched the 28% last year, 25% this year of parents that decided that they wanted to opt out of tests because of the high stakes testing that has become normative in this state. And I think, certainly we appreciate the fact that we need to have some mechanism to be able to know how well our students are doing. But the fact is that when a quarter of our parents are telling us we need to take a different tack, then probably we ought to take a different tack. As far as Albany goes, I'll tell you that, like I said at the outset, I've worked with a lot of the legislators and know a lot of them personally, and I think that's going to be an asset in this role when it's time to advocate and when it's time to engage. In fact, I was talking with our Assembly member, Harry Bronson, just last week, and we were talking about the wonderful pieces that we have here, particularly with respect to wraparound care and the difference that makes, especially as we see over the couple of last few years in Henrietta, the levels of poverty have increased in Henrietta. And so in order to be able to accommodate folks that are struggling with financial resources, wraparound care, universal pre-K, these are wonderful tools that we have at our disposal that the board should be commended, and certainly Dr. Graham should be commended for developing, that provide families with an alternate to be able to care for their children. And so we're going to be engaging with as many folks as we can in Albany and here to try to get the job done.
Thank you. Ms. Strzyzynski, have you been following the New York State Legislature and Board of Regents actions as they pertain to education and specifically to Rush-Henrietta?
I will say, like Bob, not real closely. I just finished my degree, so I've been focusing on my own studies. But I have followed a little bit on the core curriculum, and I also, like Simeon said, I did see the large, actually I probably have it in my packet, the large rate of people who had their kids opt to test out, and I do think that that obviously tells us something right there, that maybe that's something we need to look at. But I wouldn't say I looked at much else closely. I can now, though. That's the great thing. I got lots of time to study. I just finished school, so study, study, study. Learn, learn, learn.
Thank you. Mr. Logel, we'll start with you on the next question.
Make it an easy one.
What is your view on bringing the urban-suburban program to the Rush-Henrietta School District?
I think it would be a great idea. If kids aren't getting the education where they are right now, then I think let's bring them to a place that they can get the better education. Does it matter really where you're going to school or where you're living? Or no, what matters is the type of education that you can get. So I think all around would be a good thing.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney, what is your view on bringing the urban-suburban program to the RH School District?
I'm interested in looking at that, and I think there could be some benefits, maybe even financially. It's something to consider. And I would want to make sure that we have the adequate space, and I'm sure that the board would look at that and make sure that we have what we need for our students here before we bring in more. And I would definitely be open to looking at that.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Yeah, if Dr. Grand was mine, I want to wave the banner here on this one and say that, I think urban-suburban, number one, it's revenue positive for the district. So, the fact of the matter is that the per student dollars that are allocated for the children that would be coming here would be higher than what they'd be if they were in our district. And so as a consequence of that, it's a revenue positive program. So let's start dispelling some myths already about this effort. I think the second thing is that, as I mentioned at the outset, one of the strengths for our district is its diversity. And a lot of times when you hear the word diversity, right, you normally think of maybe one thing. But certainly diversity reads in a lot of different ways, and certainly economic diversity, cultural diversity, the diversity of experiences. And what I've heard over and over and over again, and quite frankly, there is a considerable amount of research that backs this up. There was a gentleman that was here just last night at the board meeting that was talking about this, and I've read some of this research historically, that young people that are in a diverse environment end up with far greater skills. And usually their success rate charts much higher than students that are not. So urban-suburban, I think, is a good thing. Certainly we want to explore it and make sure that it's done in a way and rolled out in a way that makes sense for this district. But it's kind of hard for me to conceptualize a scenario where in a district like ours, it would be potentially controversial. Henrietta is actually one of the most diverse towns in Monroe County. And so certainly I don't expect the kind of rancor that we've heard in other places. And if we can't get it done here, then we've got a lot of work to do in Monroe County. So,
Thank you. Mr. Strzyzynski, what is your view on bringing the urban-suburban program to the RH School District?
I actually agree with what everyone else has said, and I think Bob mentioned that we have people in other school districts, and I'm not going to be very clear as to which ones, but I see a lot of results from the school district from where I work. I get a lot of people that come and they're actually illiterate. They cannot read, they cannot write. It's very, very concerning to see as an adult. My husband has to listen to me come home about how upsetting it is. I think if we can give the opportunity to some of these people who don't have the same resources that we have, I think that might be great. But again, we have to have the resources that available here, that they have the space, that we have the money to be able to provide everything that's needed.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
Like everyone else has said, I think that the urban-suburban program is a wonderful program. I think that we've had the opportunity over the course of a couple of years now to have different workshops on what the program is, how it's implemented. I think our biggest concern would be, do we have the space? We just went through a major reconstruction of, because we were limited in space. So I think that if there's space, we need to talk and explore and figure out where it's most beneficial for students to come in. I don't believe that bringing the urban-suburban program into our district for its original purpose to make our district diverse is necessary, because like Simeon said, we are a very diverse community. But I think that we also have to look at the poverty rates of the urban students, and those students don't get the opportunities that our students get. So I think that would be a very big plus for students coming into our district. But I think we have to be cautious in its implementation, making sure that the community understands what the program is. So I think communicating is something that we need to do. We've had, like I said, already 3 workshops on it. We didn't get a lot of audience participation. Hopefully, when we have further workshops, they will join and give us their input. But the Urban-Suburban program is a wonderful program, and Rush-Henrietta is exploring the option of bringing it here.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Delaney, we'll start with you in the next question. How do you feel about Common Core learning standards and the current use of data in instruction and evaluation of staff?
Okay, so if I'm reading into the question correctly, Common Core standards and how is that used with evaluating staff, which would speak to the annual professional performance. I think Common Core standards, it's a set of guidelines. I think that we need guidelines to have our students be assessed to. Whether it's Common Core or something else, maybe that needs to be tweaked, but this is what we have to work with right now. And, you know, the state is making some changes in that. I think we all have to be accountable, whether it's a board member or students with testing or staff in teaching. And helping our students. I think we all have some kind of accountability, but finding the balance on that, you know, I'm open to working on making that as beneficial as possible. But really, it's all about kids, and they need to have some kind of standard to attain to. So that's what we have right now, and I'm willing to work with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Banister, how do you feel about Common Core learning standards and the current use of data in instruction and the evaluation of staff?
Sure. Well, let me just say this. I went to the doctor the other day, and I was at the doctor, and I wanted the doctor to take a look at a couple of things. And if my doctor had pulled out a gigantic manual and slammed it on the desk, and then opened the manual and started following along, and I think I would feel a little bit uncomfortable because I would recognize that my doctor has gone through extensive education. My doctor is a professional. My doctor has judgment. And I would want him, and certainly wanted him, to exercise that judgment. And I think the same thing is true for our classroom staff, our teachers. These are folks that are educated. They, in many instances, have advanced degrees. They have certainly, I think, earned the right. They've taken tests to be certified. They've earned the right to be able to use their judgment in the classroom setting. I think Common Core, as its underlying premise, as it's articulated, you know, initially makes sense to folks, right? It says, you know, geez, we've got to have some way of measuring how we're all doing, right? And so that's a fair premise. I think where we jump off the skids, where we jump off the rails, is when that kind of gets injected with steroids, and I think that's what's happened, certainly in the Common Core process. The other thing I'll say is, and I know some of the folks that are on the Board of Regents have expressed it. The rollout of Common Core, at least in theory, was that according to the Regents, they say that, well, what really happened here is that people mistook us. That when we put out Common Core and we laid out the curriculum, that was just like a guideline, and that people could really just do what they wanted, but that was kind of like a guideline. And I'm not sure that that Albany did such a great job in terms of being able to articulate how that process was going to work. And so I think that there's, you know, because it's completely flawed and fundamentally problematic, so much so that even folks in the state legislature and the executive branch have kind of walked back and said, hey, listen, we do need to reevaluate this process. And so, and again, I refer back to our parents, 25% of whom have said, hey, you know, this is having a negative impact on our children. So I definitely think that it's time for us to, you know, continue to reevaluate. We know that the cycles of these things, you know, we all know how that goes. One day it's Common Core, the next day it'll be something else. And so hopefully the next something else is something that's a little bit more thought through, that's a little bit more impactful for our children.
Thank you. All right. How do you feel about Common Core learning standards and the current use of data instruction and evaluation of
Well,
staff?
I agree with both of what they said, that there needs to be some sort of standard, obviously, both for the children and for the teachers, but I'm not sure that testing is always the way, because not every student is good at taking tests. So some people learn visually, some people learn, through touch. Everyone learns a little bit different, so if you have someone, I'm going to use the person with autism. Someone with autism isn't going to be able to take a test. It's not really telling someone if this person understands what's going on. Maybe they know everything. Maybe they, have a genius IQ, but if they're not able to take that test, that's not going to really relate. I do think that there definitely has to be some sort of standard, and I'm not opposed to testing. I definitely think there has to be testing, but I think it needs to be more specific to how someone tests. So sometimes it's a written test. Sometimes maybe someone has to demonstrate something. Sometimes it has to be verbally. So I think there has to be more to it. And I agree with Simeon said, that if the doctor came in and read out of a book, that wouldn't make you feel very good. We need teachers to be able to teach how they're comfortable. So if they have to read from something, they're not comfortable with what they're teaching or the way they're teaching, they're never going to be able to reach the kids. They have to go with their own personalities, and I agree that they have an education and they've passed a lot of things. They've done student teaching, so they've developed these skills. They have the ability to assess our kids. So I think that they need to be able to teach how they're comfortable.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
Common Core, I think, has been, like everyone else said, very misunderstood from the very beginning. For me, it is a philosophy. It is something, we've been very involved with standards-based education here in Rush-Henrietta for more than the years that Common Core has been implemented. So one example that I can give you on why I believe that the high standards are very important for our students. High expectation gives you very well prepared students. I have a child with multiple disabilities. When he was born, the doctors told me he would never walk, he would never communicate, he would never eat. Find a bed somewhere in a home for him and let the professionals take care of him. I did not do that because I knew that there's more in there. So my expectation for Tyler was he would walk, he would communicate, and he would be maybe not self-sufficient, but so to me, that high standard, that high expectation has gotten us where we are today. Tyler is a 25-year-old who does do all of the things that the doctors told us he would never do. So I think that high expectation for our students is absolutely critical. I think that the rollout was atrocious, but like Simeon said, there are modules that were a guideline. In our district, we do not pull out the book and read the modules to the kids. We have teachers that are very well, they get in those classrooms and they unpack all of the strategies that the kids need to learn what they need to learn. And I think that having high standards is a good thing. Assessments to tell you where you are is a good thing. I think maybe that the term testing has been misunderstood quite a bit, because I look back at my education and there were high stakes tests when I was in school 40 years ago. So it has not changed as far as the high standards testing, but to use those tests, and especially, and Annmarie understands as well, special needs people cannot do those tests and perform at a high level. So to take students in a classroom where you have 3 or 4 who may be performing very low because of their special needs, and then you have students in there who are average, do well, may have a bad day on a test. So to use those scores against a teacher's performance, that's something personally I don't think is the right thing to do. There are laws that the school district has to follow, so we will abide by the laws. We will make sure that our staff is getting what they need from us. I think that, my personal opinion, Common Core brought everyone together to talk about what our kids need to get there, because the kids are going into a world that needs some higher level thinking. They need to be able to work in teams. When you are sitting in a classroom where you're sitting in desks and some teacher is rote learning to you from the front, you're not learning how to be a team member. You're not learning how to work in groups. So I think that Common Core was a good thing in bringing people together to have students in our community across the board learning at high levels.
Great, thank you. Mr. Logel, how do you feel about Common Core learning standards and the current use of data in instruction and evaluation of staff?
Well, assessments have been around for a very long time, so Common Core is actually a good thing. I believe maybe the rollout could have been handled a little bit differently, but I believe the premise of it is a really good opportunity for kids to raise their standards, to raise the goals that they have. Because let's face it, if you don't have goals, you really have nothing to achieve too. And if you take a case in point, I mean, I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and my 9-year-old learns differently than my 11-year-old does. So do you want to penalize a teacher just because the kids learn at different rates? You know, on one any given day, you know, our 11-year-old may take a test really well, or someone in her class may not take that same test very well. So does that mean that the teacher should get penalized? I don't think so.
Thank you. Okay, and we started with you, right, Mrs. Delaney?
Yeah, I'm out.
All right.
It's you.
Next question, simpler. Mr. Banister, I assume you all have jobs and family commitments. Do you have the time and availability to give to this position on the board and all that it requires?
I'm glad this is short. I'm going to say yes, I do, and I want to get back to actually a little bit what was said. There is a little bit of a difference here, because I think that everybody would agree that standards are important, but I think the premise of kind of what was said here assumes that teachers don't set standards in their own classroom, right? And of course they do. And so I don't know that it's necessary to have a draconian measure that comes from Albany that says these are the way that the standards are going to be set. That's the best mechanism for us to operate, number one. And number two, I'll say this. If you meet my wife, who is a lovely, lovely woman, I want to say that on camera. If you meet my wife, she is much smarter than I am. And I, try to read here and there and kind of pick it up whatever, but she is just a really smart lady. She has her master's degree from Columbia University, just smart as a whip. But if she walked in this room right now and we set up a desk over in the corner and told her that she had to take a test because of the nerves, because of whatever, she's just not a good, that never has been, just not a good test taker, just not her bag. Brilliant woman, just not a good test taker, right? So if we acknowledge what Bob just said, right, he has 2 kids, one of which is a good test taker, the other of which is not, right? Then we are not accurately capturing their abilities simply by looking at a test. That's why we have to have some other mechanisms in place that allow us to be able to do assessments, which you're right, have been around for a long time, but in the past, a lot of those assessments, there was an allowance for the teachers to use their judgment, right? To look at their classroom and say, okay, this little guy here, he's gonna need a little bit more work because he's not the best test taker, but I know that he's picking it up, and this young lady there, oh boy, she gets these tests, all you gotta do is slip it in front of her, but is she getting the right application of the material, right? And so I think it's important for us to, really kind of parse this a little bit, because we need to make sure the goal here is not to pass the test, right? The goal here is not to get high scores. The goal here is to learn, right? The goal here is to be able to graduate and have a career and to provide for your families and your loved ones. And so we've got to come up with a better mechanism to be able to measure that. And I think that certainly the attempt is commendable, I suppose. But there's also there's a backside to this Common Core thing with folks that are being rewarded with test contracts and all that kind of stuff. And certainly tonight's not the night to go delving into all of that. But I think it's just worthwhile for us to be cognizant of the fact that there's other ways that people learn, and we want to make sure we accurately capture that.
Okay, Mrs. Strzyzynski, the question is: I assume you all have jobs and family commitments. Do you have the time and availability to give to this position on the board and all that it requires?
If you can just keep the questions that easy, that'll be wonderful. I absolutely have time. I told you I just finished school. I have 2 grown children, and I have been looking for some place to volunteer, and I only work part-time, so I have lots of time. So yes, I do.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
Obviously, yes. The time commitment is something that I have, we visit buildings on a very regular basis. We go to PTA meetings, we go to DPAC meetings. Yes, I do have the time and the commitment to continue the job. Can I just say one thing about Mr. Banister's comment on how we make sure that our students are learning in the classroom? We do assess each student individually. We have teachers that look, if you've been in the classrooms and watched how things are done, we've learned a lot about how students do learn differently. We assess each child. We deliver programs to each student's needs. We look at all of the homework and all of the personalities, and we look at the curriculum for each student individually. So I think that I don't want people to think that we're just testing each student the same way and that we're giving the same information to each student the same way, because in our district, we do not give.
Well, my comments weren't really about our district as
Okay.
much as they were about the Common Core process,
Okay.
right? Which is,
Okay.
with a question
Which-
mark. But I have
okay.
been in several
Okay.
classrooms here.
Okay.
And so I'm definitely cognizant. That's
Okay.
why I'm so emphatic about the fact that we really need to allow our teachers to use their judgment.
And we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have wonderful
Absolutely.
coaches and things that give teachers the perspective that they need in their classroom to do it their way, but to also provide the information that is required.
Thank you. Mr. Logel, I assume you all have jobs and family commitments. Do you have the time and availability to give to the position, to the board?
I do. Being a financial advisor, I set my own schedule. So if something comes up during the day, then I just make sure I don't have client meetings at that time. Fortunately for me, I have a very supportive wife. So if something needs to be done at night, she will take care of the kids and everything is good. So yes, I do have the time.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney?
Yes, I'm a part-time hygienist, a dental hygienist, and I think I've kind of proven my track record at being available to sit on committees that have met daytime and nighttime for years, and I don't see that changing.
Thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski, did you lead off last time?
No, I was me.
Okay. Yeah, Mrs. Strzyzynski. Next question. Do you agree with how the district went about with the redistricting process that will take effect in 2017?
Honestly, I don't really know how it went about, but I did happen to watch the video that Dr. Graham had on there, and it looked like they did a lot of, had a lot of groups together coming up with ideas, and then the board took upon all of those, came up with some additional ones, and they had a lot of ideas, and they put it out there for the community to decide if they thought that was a good one or if they should go back to their second choice. And I don't know a lot about it other than that process, and I think that seems pretty good.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
Being a part of that group of people who went out and talked to the community and got questions from the community, got input. We got a lot of input. It was an ever-evolving plan. It took 3 years to get to a vote because we really studied and looked at and just talked and really kind of, I think that it is a great, there's been a lot of angst, but I think because we've been able to go out and talk to the community and talk to our constituents and find out what their worries are, we've been able to calm a lot of people. The work is not done. We're still in process. The teacher teams and the building teams are still talking about the programs and how things are going to be designed. So it's still a work in progress. It's not done yet, but I think that being able to open up the process to anyone who is interested in voicing their opinion really helped us make some sound decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Logel? Do you agree with how the district went about with the redistricting process that will take effect in 2017?
Yeah, I do. I think there was a lot of thought that went into this. A lot of people were asked about this. A lot of opinions were given. I think Dr. Graham and the board did just a wonderful job on how they handled this. because they're trying to appease everybody. And you know that in the district, that's impossible.
That's impossible.
And so I think that the way that they went about it was very good, so thank you.
Thank you.
I believe it was a necessary evil, right? Because if we're trying to get full-day K, then how do we afford full-day K unless we do something drastic? And so the ability that we have as a district to just be able to do that, and that, that's kudos to Dr. Graham and again the board, that they have the foresight to know that this needs to be done. Let's think about this, 3 years ago, coming down the pipeline. So yes, I do believe that the way it was handled was very good.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney?
I sat on the space committee, so even before the redistricting came about, every year we take a look and project out for 5 years what our space needs are. And we could see this coming down the pike, that we were adding to one school and one school was growing much larger than the others, and we couldn't continue to sustain that. And so that was a piece of what we advised the board, that this is coming down the line. They in turn took that and did a great job communicating, which I think is really important, to get feedback, look at different suggestions, take in suggestions. They did a lot of work to communicate back and forth. And I think taking it to the vote and seeing the great approval rate on it tells you that the communication was there and that people were ready to move forward with it. Is it going to be easy for everyone? No. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we think it's going to be total, icing on the cake. But I think we've done the best that we could do to make those changes and to do it with the least amount of pain. And I look forward to seeing what comes about.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Sure. I think I've had the opportunity to talk to various stakeholders across the district, talk to parents, and I think, by and large, the collaborative approach, certainly want to offer some commendation to Dr. Graham for the collaborative approach that he's taken. I was glad to hear the language and also read the language online and kind of hear him at some of the meetings talk a little bit about making sure that everybody had, a voice at the table. And I think the real question, of course, is in the implementation, right? And so there's the discussion phase, and then as we move into implementation, I think it's absolutely critical that we continue to have voices at the table, that we continue to take into account the concerns that are raised by each of the individual stakeholders that have such a vested interest in this process. The one thing I will say, though, is that a lot of times with organizations, it's easy to kind of get caught in the echo chamber a little bit. And I know that there are a lot of parents that I've talked to that are not kind of part of the activist parent community, right? They're not the folks that are necessarily engaged in schools as much. And when they came out to vote, we certainly were perhaps maybe a little bit more aware of the kindergarten component, maybe not as aware of kind of the fuller restructuring. And so one of the things that I intend to do, again, if elected to the board, is really kind of make it a mission to engage even more parents and to talk to more folks, to try to fill up rooms like this, to make sure that folks come out. And like I said, last night I was at the board meeting, sole man in the room, in addition to folks that are on the board. So we definitely want to try to encourage more people to come out and participate and be a part of that. One idea that did come up last night, just in that same vein of thought, is the idea of doing a transmission of the meetings, kind of like what we're doing here tonight. And I think that's generally a good thing. I mean, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and the cool thing is that we're not, there's no dirt here, so it makes it even, that much easier to proceed with it. So, I just think, again, commendation to Dr. Graham for the process, and let's make sure that it continues in that same vein as we move into implementation.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Wickerham, what have you done to familiarize? So for some of this, this is a bit of redundancy.
Okay.
But this is the question. What have you done to familiarize yourself with the district beyond a parent perspective? For example, what district committees have you done?
Okay. Well, like I said at the beginning, I started out in the Rush-Henrietta community as a parent of a second grader over at File, and although working full-time, was able to volunteer on field trips and things like that. When Tyler was born, I became very involved in the Special Ed Parents Forum, became their chairperson for several years, and worked with the Committee on Special Education. I was the parent representative for many years as well on that committee, so I learned a great deal about how the special education system in our district worked, and I think that afforded me some conversations many times with the superintendent on my perspective. My child was a lot more involved than most of the students in this district, but I still believed that inclusion was a critical point that we were kind of missing, and it's been just a joy for me to see how far the district has come in the past 25 years, from very few people being included in our district to almost all of our special ed students being included in our district. So kudos to the administration and the teachers for making sure that that happens here. From the Special Ed Parents Forum, I was asked to participate in DPAC. So I, every first Thursday of the month for a few years, was around the table and then asked to be part of the leadership. And from DPAC, I went to Budget and then to Space Committee this past couple of years, being on the board. I'm also involved with the Monroe County School Boards Association and the State School Boards Association. We, what else do I do in this district? I liaison to the Health and Safety Committee liaison to the FILE parent group, that I attend those meetings on a regular basis. I'm forgetting a couple, so I think I've been pretty involved.
All right, Mr. Logel, beyond a parent perspective, what have you done to familiarize yourself with the district?
Well, when my daughter went to Sherman, my wife and I decided that let's reach out, let's join the PTA, and I wanted to learn more about the school and the district and how everything operated. And after talking a little bit to Jeff Pollard, and then he said to me, he goes, "Well, you're a numbers guy." He said, "Will you represent us at BAC?" So I said, "Sure." So I joined BAC at that point. I thought it was extremely interesting on how Dr. Graham and Andy and the board just comes up with the budget. It's incredible. So I decided at that point that I really wanted to stay on BAC. After that, as it turns out, I was asked to chair it the following year, so I've been doing that for 4 years. Since we have another child in Berger, I said, well, let's get involved with the PTO there too, to see what their issues are and insights are compared to Sherman. And then finally, this year, I was asked to join the Finance and Audit Committee for the district. So that is actually very interesting as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney?
Shared quite a few of mine in the beginning. You said it would be redundant, but I started out, I was a room parent, so, in the classroom a lot, volunteering that way, and joined the PTA pretty quickly because I wanted to know what's going on in the school. And from there, I was slightly coerced to be secretary, and that's where it started. Did that for several years. Sat on shared decision making, which is a committee that looks at school improvement plans and how to best implement them within the school. So then that's more of a school-wide program. And then the District Parent Advisory Committee, as I said, it's parents coming together from all the different schools and some of our committees, and meeting with Dr. Graham every month and learning some of the ins and outs of the district. I followed that through Berger Parent Group, through the NGA Parent Group, through the high school parent group, and I've continued on SDM and DPAC and Space Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Sure. So I think my initial interest in district really got stimulated at the outset of the discussion around urban-suburban, actually, and at the same time kind of witnessing some of the rancor and quite frankly just the behavior that we saw in some other districts, and I'm going to call them out, Spencerport. I just thought that was really, really ugly. And so and when I heard that the conversation was starting in our own community, that really got me kind of thinking about, gee, you know, what's going on in Henrietta, and what can we do to make sure that we don't have that same kind of display. From there, I've had the opportunity to work with folks over at the Impact, the Minority Parents Advisory Council, which has really been rewarding, largely because while there's a lot of conversation about some of the dynamics that are at play, there's also just a broader conversation about how to engage more folks and get people to participate in the process and be a part. So that's been really a nice group to be a part of. And I think the other part is that just in terms of perspective or insight to kind of familiarize myself, I really spent a lot of time trying to kind of get to know this budget a little bit just on my own, and kind of being online and checking out the documents that are on the website. And I think the thing that really strikes me is that as a taxpayer, as just somebody that just kind of is a resident of the community, we could probably even do a little bit more to reach out to folks that don't necessarily have a student that's in the district, but certainly has a vested interest because they're footing the bill to make sure that our community has wonderfully educated people. So one of the things that hopefully, again, if elected, I'd like to do is to kind of think about whether it's through a committee structure or maybe some other mechanism, a way of engaging taxpayers that don't necessarily have kids in the district, but again have a significant vested interest in the decisions that are being made.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski, what have you done to familiarize yourself with the district beyond a parent perspective?
Well, unlike them, I haven't been on any committees recently. I was the room mother. I started out like you did. I was the room mother for my kids starting in, I think my son started school in 1994 until my daughter finished up through 6th grade. I think I volunteered on various capacities. I was in the PTA and a bunch of things. Once we got to high school, my husband was still on a day-night rotation, so I didn't get to participate because I had to take my kids to and from wherever they had to go. I did volunteer all the way through on the sports side, though. I was in sports boosters. I volunteered for each of the sports teams that my kids were on, all the way up to 2 years past my daughter graduated. So for the last 2 years, I haven't volunteered here, but I've had experience before that. So.
Thank you. Okay, the last question before you'll each have a chance to provide some closing comments is Mr. Vogel, I'll ask you to begin. What is the one thing that you think makes you the best candidate?
I believe that I'm the best candidate because there's a couple of different reasons, but the one thing that you want is the fact that I've been pretty heavily involved with the budget for the last 5 years. And let's face it, a lot of what happens in the school district is budgeting and making sure that we have the funds to do exactly what is needed to educate the kids properly. And so I believe that, being heavily involved in the budget gives me a leg up on the other candidates.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney, what is the one thing that you think makes you the best candidate?
I would have to say it's the number of years of experience that I've been not only serving on committees and things like that, but also even in the classroom. I'm a great advocate for our teachers. They do hard work, and sometimes they don't get much thanks. And so I'm quick to shoot an email or notice things and recognize that. And I think I would be a candidate that is a good team player, but also looks to reach the goal and keep the end in mind. Why are we doing what we're doing? And I think that's what I can bring to the table.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Sure. So here's a little statistic that maybe folks may or may not know. We register roughly 450 to 500 new students to this district on an annual basis. So let's put that into perspective. There are 5,400 or so students that are enrolled in our district. So that would be roughly a shade under 10% of new folks that are coming into our district on an annual basis. And so I think when I look at my own personal experience, my own personal background, I have a young family. My wife and I, as I've mentioned before, have that wonderful bundle of energy who's getting ready to come into the district. Incidentally, those new registrants don't include people that are coming into kindergarten, and so that number is even higher. And so those folks need a voice too, right? Folks that are going to be a part of this district for a very, very long time. I said we've got, certainly 13 to 14 years that we're going to be engaged in this district, and I think that is certainly a strength. I'll also add to that, I think that certainly a breadth of experience, having worked on a number of different levels and in a number of different locations, I think is certainly going to be a benefit. I think a big role for the school board is as an advocate, as I've mentioned earlier, and I think that that's a role that I'm kind of primed to play here. And I think finally diversity, and again, I just highlight that diversity isn't just about race and all that kind of stuff, but it's even more just about a different way of perhaps approaching it and thinking about things. And so I'm excited about just maybe a little bit different perspective than what's kind of been on the board historically, and kind of being able to kind of shift some of the thinking so that we have an even stronger outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess I would, it's hard if you can just pick one. I'll say caring. I care about people in general, so whether it's the teachers, the support staff, the students, the community as a whole. I think with that comes good listening. It comes, it's hard to just label it that. I think that I have the ability to understand because of that caring. I can empathize with people, whether it's the parent talking about, the student giving, the teacher giving their student a hard time, which they think might be happening to may or may not be true, or understanding the teacher who maybe isn't being heard from maybe Dr. Graham. I think I have a good set of ears to listen, and I care, so I think that can make a difference.
Thank you. And finally, Mrs. Wickerham, what is the one thing that you think makes you the best candidate?
I think for me, being the incumbent, I have the historical knowledge on the programs and services that we are currently implementing. The one-to-one technology initiative was something that was started a couple of years ago, and we have a very big plan that is rolling out on a gradual basis, and I think knowing where that plan came from and why we're doing things the way we do them. The same thing with the reconfiguration. Just having the historical data, the knowledge, the communication, I think that being open and like Annmarie said, I care about this district. It's become family, and I think that just having that passion for making sure that our students are getting what they need and having that historical knowledge and that consistent leadership for me is a very important piece of why I would like to continue.
Thank you. Okay, so finally, we'll allow about a minute for each of you to provide some closing comments to end our night. Mrs. Delaney, I'm going to ask that you go first.
Well, in closing, I would just ask that you as the voters consider all of our qualifications, and I would hope that you would look at my experience. I've been very passionate about kids in our district, and I will continue to be passionate whether I'm elected or not, but I'm hoping that you'll take a look at my history and my passion in the things that I've served on and worked on for kids and staff, and that you'll consider me a candidate for the board.
Thank you. Mr. Banister?
Sure. So thank you, everybody, again, for coming out, and thanks to everybody that's going to watch this video at home. And thanks to the fellow candidates for putting your names forward and for standing up to be a part of this challenge. And thank you to Phyllis for your service and for the time that you've already spent on the board. I think again that we have just a wonderful outlook for this community, for this board. We've got a district that benefits from a strong tax base. I suppose I didn't mention that I'm a commercial real estate appraiser. That's what I actually do every day. And so as a commercial real estate appraiser, I have just a keen awareness of the intersection between making sure that we've got a strong property tax base that's driven by the retail, the industrial that we have in this community. We're blessed, but we would be of major folly if we didn't take that blessing and manage it the best way possible. And that's what the school board is about. Informed oversight, making sure that as we spend our dollars, we spend them in a way that's smart, that we empower our teachers to drive the decision-making in their classrooms, that we make sure that we empower the administration to continue to use its smart planning and the tools that they've implemented to manage our demographics and finances. I set before you my own qualifications. I set before you experience both in terms of the time that I've been interfacing with the school district, but also kind of a broader set of experiences that I think shed some light, having worked in the state legislature, having worked here locally, that hopefully those kinds of things allow me to be able to make a significant contribution to make life better for your kids, for my kid, and for our community, generally speaking.
Thank you. Mrs. Strzyzynski?
Well, I think that everyone's going to probably have the same kind of ideas, and we all want the same thing. We want our kids, all of the kids, everyone's kids, to leave school with unlimited success. That's the goal I think that everyone has in mind. We want to do the best for the kids. I think my perspectives are a little different. I'm not really so much into the budgets. I definitely don't have any financial training, although I can learn it. That's the other great thing. I learn really easily. I love to learn. My husband will tell you it's nonstop. I'm willing to learn all that. But I think the best thing I can offer is that I'm pretty open, and I love to talk to people, and I will work really hard to hopefully blend everyone together so there's no us and them. So everyone's happy, the kids are going to do well. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you. Mrs. Wickerham?
For me, I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight, for allowing me to serve you for the past 9 years. I would really like to continue. We've had some wonderful things happening in this district, from the upgrades to our curriculum maps to align with the Common Core, which is pretty controversial, but we've done a really good job with that. The standards, being able to implement the one-to-one technology initiative, we have award-winning music programs, we have sports programs that achieve at very high levels. We have all kinds of extracurricular activities that I'm very proud to be able to offer our students. I think that we've done all of that also by maintaining a very well-developed budget, keeping our tax rate stable for the past 10 plus years. I think that we've offered a very high quality education at a reasonable cost, and I'm very proud to have been a part of that for the last 9 years, and I believe that I can still add value as a member to the Board of Education, and I would truly appreciate being able to serve the district that I've come to love so much.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Logel?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Amy, thank you for moderating this. I would like to ask for your vote on a little different perspective here, I guess, than everybody else's. With 2 kids in the district, I'm kind of in the trenches right now, right? I talk to the teachers. I talk to some of the little kids that, I go visit the kids every once in a while, and I talk to the kids, and I get to hear what their issues are, what their views are and things. The teachers, we have functions, and I get to talk to the teachers, and you have conversations, and they tell you their druthers about full-day kindergarten, or about the Common Core, or the budget, and their concerns about their jobs, and the school reconfiguration. So I get a different perspective because I'm right down in the trenches with these people, and I think that would be invaluable for me, for serving on the board, as well as my financial background. That helps a lot.
Thank you very much. And that concludes the evening.